Now to those other tariffs. As we mentioned, the new global tariffs plus 10% on China and a proposed 25% on Mexico and Canada. How will all of that affect you? Joining us to discuss is Dr. Brian Kelley from the Department of Economics at Seattle University. So first, Dr. Kelley, your reaction to this latest announcement on tariffs by the president?
The latest announcement is that we're going to engage in something called reciprocal tariffs, which means the U.S. will set its rates at the same rates that other countries set against the U.S. The difficulties with that are many, many, many. And just to point to a couple of them, it breaks down the current system of rules about the international trading order. Currently, we're based on a system of treating all other countries the same. In other words, every country that sends something to the United States, with a few exceptions like North Korea, see the same tariff rate. Now, if we have country-by-country tariff rates, that means that comparative advantage, the thing that drives trade, is no longer free to act. In other words, the world won't be making things where it's most efficient to make them. It will be making things where U.S. tariffs tell them to make them. So that's the chief problem. It breaks down the order that the United States has been sponsoring since 1947.
So President Trump is arguing that this sort of evens the playing field because we pay so much more to countries than they seem to be paying on their end. Do you agree or disagree?
I largely disagree, not entirely, but largely. Other developed countries' tariff rates are actually pretty similar to ours. Canada might be 1% higher, Japan 1% higher, European Union maybe a couple percent higher. So with our main trading partners, the numbers are pretty equal. Now, Mexico is somewhat higher at 7%, but we don't export, huge amounts to Mexico. There is some truth to the fact that other countries have higher tariff rates than we do, but for most of our major trading partners, not a lot higher. And the more important factor is by putting up a tax between us and other countries, we're kind of shooting ourselves in the foot.
Ford executives have said the proposed tariffs on Mexico, and you brought up Canada, would seriously hurt the U.S. auto industry. What would that look like?
So the proposed tariffs on those two countries are 25%. Now, that can be much more serious than these reciprocal tariffs that are being discussed. If the reciprocal tariffs are done honestly, as I alluded to a moment ago, the increase in the tariff rates won't be all that enormous in general. But 25%, those are whopping big tariffs. And the problem with the auto industry in particular is that their production process is integrated across the Canadian and U.S. border. So we might import a part from Canada, it goes into a subassembly. Subassembly goes back to Canada, gets further manufactured, comes back to the U.S., gets put into a finished automobile. So that part has crossed the border twice, 25% is shot. It suddenly becomes uneconomic to continue this integrated production system, and yet it would take many years to unravel it.
There's a report by the Brookings Institute, I'm sure that you've seen. It estimates we could see 177,000 jobs lost in the U.S. across what sectors? I think a lot of Americans wonder, well, how are these tariffs going to impact me? How might it impact our economy in ways that we would feel it?
Well, we'll see if the tariffs are widely established, in particular against Mexico and Canada at 25%, we'll see higher energy prices unless those are exempted. We'll see great disruption to some manufacturing sectors. We'll see, especially automobiles. We'll see much higher prices in some sectors, and we're already seeing that in steel. I noticed that February steel prices are more than 10% higher than January, even before the steel tariffs were put in, and the March futures are more than 10% higher than the February prices. So prices for steel, where the tariffs have just been implemented, have already skyrocketed, and they're heading for the stratosphere.
Not to mention inflation, at least last month, ticked up. Dr. Kelley from Seattle University, thank you so much for joining us tonight. We appreciate it.
My pleasure.